Hello everyone, welcome to our December Training Tuesday for OU Campus. Today's topic is creative components. Now that components have been out for a while, we're going to explore some creative use cases for them that make editing page content both simple and versatile. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode as the session is being recorded. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. We'll attempt to address your questions during the presentation. After the formal presentation has ended, we will review and answer all remaining questions. Your presenter today is Barbara McQuillan, Training Supervisor. Barbara, it's all yours.
Thanks, Erica. All right, hello. Happy holidays to everyone. Today we're going to be talking about some creative components. So let's dive into what we're going to talk about today. We're going to begin by talking about what resources are available if you're brand new to components. So the intention of this particular webinar is not to walk through how components are created, but to talk about some creative uses for them. So if you're starting a little bit newer in that background, I'll talk to you about some resources that are available to you. I'm going to give you a couple of disclaimers about some of the things that I'm going to be showing you today, so just things to keep in mind as we go through. I'm going to talk about the webcast resources, so where can you find all these amazing things that we're going to be building today? And then we're going to do some hands-on stuff. So it'll be inside a sandbox environment, and I'm going to show you some nice uses for components as we're talking about using them for news listings, using them to wrangle your editors, and using them to enhance your website design. So talking about resources if you are brand new to components. So we do have pages on our support site that are dedicated to components. From there, you can actually see how to create them, how to edit them, how to launch them, and how to actually use them on the page. So all of that is documented on our support site. Additionally, we have done some previous Training Tuesday webcasts specifically on components. So that link there will actually take you to our Training Tuesday page where you'll be able to see all of our previous Training Tuesdays. So in those previous webcasts, we've done a whole bunch of different things, including showing you how to convert your table transformation snippets into components, how to build brand new ones using HTML as a base, and how to use XSL with them. So we're not going to dive into any of those today because those resources are available to you. So there's some additional viewing for your viewing pleasure there. All right, let's talk about a couple of disclaimers. So today's webcast is going to present unique creative uses for components. It is all component code based in HTML. All the styling that we're going to be introducing here is included as inline CSS, and that's just for simplicity's sake. If you are a little bit more advanced in your background in coding and you wanted to create a separate CSS file and then pull that in, you absolutely could. The only difference would be instead of using the component to actually insert the inline CSS, you instead would use the component to insert the appropriate class. So you do have that ability, but for simplicity's sake, for this particular presentation, I've kept all of our styling inline. I'm going to provide to you all of the example code for the components I'm going to be showing you today. So be sure to cross-reference your own website design just to ensure that the styling that I have included in these example components is going to match your branding, match your website, and things like that. You want to make sure that you're staying consistent with that. And then finally, the example components that I'm presenting here are just meant to be demonstrative of what's possible. I have not tested all of these components on every browser type. I have not tested them on every single screen size. It's just to show you what is possible. So if you are planning on taking some of the example code that I'm going to be providing to you guys here and then using it on your live site, by all means, feel free, enjoy, have fun, but make sure it works with the branding, with screen sizes, and with the target browsers. After we're done with the webcast today, this particular PowerPoint with all of those links is going to be available on the Training Tuesday page of our support site. Additionally, all of the example code with instructions on how to fill out the fields when you are building out these components will also be available on that Training Tuesday page for our support site. So you'll have all of those resources available to you. All right, with all that, we're going to go ahead and jump into OU Campus. Let's take a look here. All right, so it looks like we have some things going on in our chat window here. Looks like we're struggling to see the screen. We can see the screen now, but it is not clear.
From our end, everything seems to be running well. So if you do seem to be having a video or audio issue, I would recommend trying to reconnect. There's nothing that we can see on our end that's not working. So it may be maybe just something on your end.
Yep, it is the magical answer for most technology. Turn it all off, turn it back on, see if it works.
Yeah.
Looks like we have another comment. It looks good from here. So it looks like the transmission's coming through right. So if you are having that difficulty, turn it off, turn it back on, and we'll be able to go from there. And like I mentioned, the resources, including the recording for this session, will be available on our Training Tuesday. So if you miss a couple of minutes in the beginning, you can always rewatch them. All right, let's talk about components. So I want to start by talking about using your components for news listings. So I have this fancy Training Tuesday section inside my OU campus site. I'm going to open up this example page here and just open up my content. So inside my implementation, I have assets that allow me to build news listings on the page. So clicking on that Insert Asset button, the one I wanted to point out to you is this news admissions. When I insert it on the page, though, it is an asset. I get this hashed green box, and if I select off of it, I get the hashed gray box. Either way, what I'm looking at here is a placeholder. It's telling me that, yes, I've placed the asset here, but no, it is not editable here. So oftentimes I see schools who want to take these news listings and maybe switch them to different RSS feeds, change the filtering options depending upon how your implementation is set up. But that's not something that can be done on the page itself. If I wanted to do that, I have to hover over content. I'm going to open up assets in a new tab. And I'm going to go ahead and find that news-admissions again. So this is my code for my news listing. This is a slightly older code because as you notice here, it does have the actual PHP listed inside of it. Your newer implementations, the code for your news listing is going to look different. It is usually a lot cleaner. It has just a couple of nodes where you're just listing out, this is the feed, this is the filtering options. So you may not have all of this actual PHP code in it. Moral of the story on this one, if you are planning on using a component for what I'm about to show you, use your own news listing asset code. Don't use this. This requires scripting in the background to actually make this work. So use what you have in yours. But essentially for mine, if we kind of bypass all of the code here, it's essentially allowing me to specify three things. The RSS feed itself, any of the tags on those pages that I want to use as the listing, and mine also includes the number of articles that I will see in the list on the page. So what I can do is I can just take this whole chunk of code and bring it over and put it into a component. So hovering over content and going to components, I've already created one of those called news listing. Checking it out, I'm going to go to the source code. You're going to notice code here looks pretty similar, but instead of having those specifically filled out pieces, I've created component fields to fill in these parts. So let's flip over to the form element so I can show you which ones I've used here. My RSS feed here is a file chooser. Now, the nice thing about using a file chooser inside a component is you can be very specific about where that file should come from. I have my label here. I am making this a required field because I'm not really going to have a listing without a feed behind it. And switching over to my advanced tab, I can specify my starting location. So all of my RSS feeds I keep inside a folder called RSS. So I'm going to automatically drop any of my editors straight to that place. Your RSS feeds are always going to be an XML file. So I've specified that here as well. That way people aren't accidentally grabbing other random files that maybe accidentally got put into a folder. So they can make sure that they're getting a feed appropriately here. Lock to path means wherever I'm telling you to start from, you can't go any higher than that. So if I had additional child sections inside here, my editor could go navigating through them, but they can't get any higher up than this point. It's to make sure that people are staying inside that space that I'm directing them to. And then finally, the default server for files. Well, my RSS feeds actually live on my production server. They're not on my staging server inside OU Campus. So I can specify that I want to drop my public off directly on the production server. That way they're exactly where they need to be to find these RSS feeds. My second field here is actually a tag chooser. So in here, I can decide whether or not this is going to be a required field. If I'm using this news listing and I want just all of my articles to appear that are part of that feed, then I don't need any filtering. So I could leave this set to not required. And under my advanced tab, when I'm doing some tag filtering here, I have a couple of options. A fixed tag is a tag that will always be applied. So if this particular listing should always have a particular tag on it, I can include it here and those will always be there. A filtered tag is going to be any tag that can be chosen. So if on this component, I want to give my editors a select list of options, I could choose them here. We have a question, is there a way, or will there be eventually, to have subcomponents that repeat as part of a main component? For example, I'd like to have a component that created a framework for accordion and subcomponents that were sections of the accordion. It's a good question. It is one of the limitations that we have right now with components is that they're not conditional in that way, where I can't just continue adding fields on the fly. They're built and hard-coded when they're originally created. So it is a suggestion that we've had before. I do believe we have a feedback forum post on it. So what I can do is I can send over the feedback forum, let me make a note, idea. And then on our feedback forum, all of our customers can upvote ideas. And then our product team is able to look at those ideas and decide what can be shuffled into our roadmap. So that would be a great one in order to shuffle into the roadmap. So thank you for that suggestion. I'll make sure to send out that for you. Another question here, is the tag chooser only selecting tags specified in the site settings or all tags in the account? This is actually going to give me a selection of all tags that are listed. And actually, if I scroll down, you're going to notice some of them have this gray background. Those are tags that have been disabled. So I'll be able to see all of my tags that are available in the account.
Yeah, and tags are account-wide. There are no specific tags for sites. So like there's no site settings for tags. It's just in the account. So if they're available in the account, they're available anywhere.
Agreed. Thank you. All right. The last field that I have here is the number of items to display. And there are a couple of different ways I could have set up this particular question. I could have done it as a drop down or as a radio button where I had specific numbers that you could click on and choose. For mine though, I decided to go a little bit fancier and I'm using this short text element here. So it is actually going to be a text box. I've put in some restrictions here though to make sure that I'm getting answers that are the number that I want. So I have made this a required field, and down here at the bottom, I've set my minimum and my maximum length to 1. So I'm only going to get 1 character in here. Under advanced, I have decided to validate this with a regular expression. And I've used this expression here, square brackets 1-9. The error message and what this regular expression essentially means is that it has to be a single number between 1 and 9. So I've made that restriction here to make sure that the information that's being provided to me will be used appropriately. We have a point here, going back to that idea of the tag chooser. We can restrict what tags appear in page properties via site settings. You can manage your tag access. That may be what you're doing. So you can choose specific tags that will be available and lock out tags that are not. So I think that is probably what you are able to do. That's a great use for tag access, actually.
I think that would only apply to that would only apply to files within the site. Yeah, so pages and folders and things like that. So I think components would look at what's in the account. It wouldn't be bound by site settings, I believe.
I would have to test it out, but I'm going to lean towards that direction too, just because components are also account-wide. So if you're creating a component for a specific site, you'd want to make sure that those match because the component will probably have the entire list in it. That's a great use for tag access. I'm going to make a note of that and I'm going to steal it for later. Thank you very much. All right. So these three fields that I've created here, back over to my source code, I've just inserted them into the appropriate places in the code itself. So I need to keep those single quotes around it. I need to keep my commas, my semicolons, all of those things I'm not going to mess with. I'm just going to drop those particular field answers into those places. So now that I have this component created, back to the page we were on before, I'm going to get rid of this asset. I'm going to bring out the component instead. We're going to take a look at that news listing and I'm going to insert it. So now I'll choose my RSS feed. Notice it's dropping me off at RSS. I'm already on my production tab, and notice I can't click any higher in this field. This breadcrumb to Galena is locked for me, so I am locked to this path. I'm going to go ahead and choose just my regular news.xml. I'm going to choose a tag here. I have a lovely tag already set up called instruction, so I'm going to use that. And maybe for here, I'm going to have it display, say, 2 articles. Bottom right-hand corner, I'll click Save. Now, on the component itself, when you're building it, you do have the option of whether or not the component should preview inside the WYSIWYG. Back over to my Components tab for a quick second. When I'm in the source view, I have this box here. It allows me to preview it inside the editor while I'm editing. Now, I have chosen not to for this particular one, and it's because it is a script that is intended to be run and will run effectively on the production server. It won't preview effectively inside OU Campus. So I have left it as that blue placeholder just for this one. For others that are HTML based, I have left that so we can see the preview as we go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and save. We'll go ahead and publish this page out. We'll take a look at it on my live page. Perfect. So here are my 2 articles listed here. They're both going to have that instruction tag on it. If I come back inside this editable region, maybe I want to change how many listing articles I have available here. Well, I can easily do that on the page by just editing that component. So I know that there are 3 articles that are part of this particular feed that have already been tagged with instruction. So let's say 4, so that way it's a little bit larger than that. Save and exit, and we'll publish one more time. So back to my live page, quick refresh. Those are my 3 articles. Ooh, 2017, I need to update my news. But now I can see how easy it is for me to make those adjustments right here on the page itself when I have page-specific filtering or page-specific listings that I want all set up here. All right, so there's one good use of components. The next kind of genre that I want to talk about is ways that you can kind of wrangle your editors. Oh, question. Can you add components inside include file sidebar INC like you did in an asset? That's a good question. So the component is going to be rendered by XSL. So if I have anything in the component that requires XSL, I cannot put it into a file inside OU Campus that is a .inc like nav.inc. Those are not going to be managed by your XSL, so you won't have it render. If it's a flat HTML file though, that's a good question. Let me make a note of that. I'm going to need to do a little digging and research on that one to let you know. So I will reply to you with that answer. That's a good one. All right. Ways to wrangle your editors. So there are a couple of different things that I've seen. So for the most part, when you're using a component, what you're really doing is you're using it for just a specific design element. So I have a design element here. I'm going to call it my student spotlight. So it's giving me specific information. Oh, we're not going to tell anybody that one. There you go. So you're giving your editor specific prompts here, and those prompts are then going to be applied to put in a specific styling. So those are very specific for design elements that go into the page. They can be placed anywhere on the page, above text, below text. You have a lot of flexibility there. Now, some of the things that I've seen from different schools is they want this structure, but they want it to be a little bit either grander or smaller. So I wanted to address both of those options. Let's say, back to our pages list here, that I have a departmental page, and you have a very specific way you want the page itself to be built out. So I built this just using the WYSIWYG. So I have my headings here. These are H2s, and then I have all of my text here in a paragraph. I've inserted my image using the WYSIWYG editor with my insert/edit image. My second section here, again, another H2, my image here as it should appear, all of my text. Down here, third section with two paragraph text. And then in this middle here, I'm actually using the block quote. So depending upon how your CSS is written, you may have some special styling for a block quote. Mine happens to, so I'm using that here. So this is a very particular structure. I want to make sure every department is going to be following this structure on their page. Well, what I can do after building it out once is I can just turn it into a component. Inside your editor, you have a little icon that allows me to see the source code for this editable region. So I can take this code and copy all of it and bring it into a component. I've gone ahead and already created a component for it. So back to my index page. We'll get rid of that news listing. And the component that I have here, I have called department page. So it's going to prompt me for all of those pieces of information, and it's going to put them into the appropriate places. I know I can maintain the styling. So I have some text over here on the side that I've already gone through and built out. So let me just go ahead and drop this text in, so that way you're not sitting here watching me type forever. As exciting as that would be, I know. I have uploaded some images. I did the same thing on this component. I've restricted and locked my file path here. So in my previous life, I was a teacher of science. So I'm going to go ahead and choose one of my science images here. Here's my alt text. No, we're going to spell it right. There we go. My second section title. Now I can be really specific with these different fields. So for my titles here, maybe your preference for how this looks is that every section should have 2 words. Each title should be 2 words. So I can restrict it by using a regular expression. I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. Again, my text, I'll bring in this nice chunk from here. I'm going to choose another image here. Maybe for this one, this is going to be that wider section 2 image. So I have this image here that's 1024 by 574. So that should be nice and wide for me there. I'll put in some alt text. That's not how you spell hubble little. And then finally for my last section here, I'm going to need blocks of text for above and below. And then in the middle, I'm going to put a quote. All right, so I've gone through and I filled out all of those pieces. Bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to click Save. And you're going to notice all of that styling that I had on my department page is being appropriately applied here. I have my titles that are going to be in my H2s. Let's go ahead and save and exit. My titles are appropriately my H2s. My paragraph text is here. My image has the appropriate width here. This image, again, appropriate width with all of my information here. So I can easily use a component to build out that entire field. The question here is, what if you want to add another section? So the way that the components are built is this hard-coded text, or hard-coded code. So if I come over here into my components and I take a look at my department page, checking out going to source, I have to specify each one of my sections. So each H2, each paragraph tag, each image tag, all of that is pre-built here and hard-coded. So if I wanted to add, say, a section 4 here, I couldn't do it with the component. It's not flexible in that way at this time. So if I wanted an additional section, I could just physically add it on the page using the WYSIWYG. But for this, it would lock you to the number. I have a question here of, can you add prompts to the fields? Yes, you can. So on any of my fields here, I can add helper text. I can add placeholder text. And if that isn't sufficient for what you want, so actually let's add some. This is helper text. So I can see in my preview over here on the right, I'd see that text on the bottom. I could view my placeholder text, 2 words. So I do have that ability here. I also have a field called instructional text. This is literally just a chunk of text that'll go inside the middle of the form. So if I need more room to explain something, or if I want to put more instructions, you have this block that you can just build into those forms. I had put in the regular expression to restrict my titles to 2 words. Let me show you how that worked. So here's that section 1 title. I've added that helper text, placeholder text. I didn't make it required. And I give it a minimum maximum length. I find for a lot of headings, if the heading gets too long, it starts to fall off on the next line, and then it looks a little wonky. So this is a nice way to restrict your editors from doing that. On my advanced tab, I am validating with a regular expression. And what the heck is happening here? Well, I'm requiring the first letter that I type to be a capital letter. I'm requiring any number of lowercase letters after that. And then I'm allowing for white space in between a second word that starts with the first with capital letter, and then all of my lowercase letters after that. And again, I'm able to customize my error message here, so I can have it specify what I'm looking for. All right. So that is another nice use to kind of restrict your editors using components. You can create a component for your entire page, have the entire page use it. All right, so moving on to kind of our next section is when we're talking about wrangling those editors. There are options that you have inside the WYSIWYG that you can turn on and off, but sometimes you want to keep the option but restrict it down. What am I talking about here? Let's open up this editable region again. We'll go ahead and dish out this component. Save. All right, so any of the icons that I have here, I can completely remove creating a custom toolbar. So for example, if I don't want my editors to be inserting an image, I can completely take this button away. But what if I want them to insert an image, but I don't want them to have as much freedom as this modal allows? Well, I can, in my administrative settings, remove the dimensions option. So my editors won't be able to change the dimensions of the image. It would only be included on the page at its set size. But what if I didn't want to restrict them from making the size, but I wanted to give them a select set of options? You can only have images that are one of these 3 sizes. Additionally, under appearance, I can change the alignment of my image. So I could push that image to the right, as I see in this little preview. I can scoot it over to the left and have my text float on either side. But maybe those are the only options I want. I don't want them to have all of these other options here, but they're included as part of this dropdown. I can completely remove the dropdown from my editors, but I can't restrict it. So that's the kind of thing that we can do using a component. I can give you a select set of options instead. So let's take it to the extreme. Let's take away all of the buttons and give our editors just the ability to insert a component and save and exit the region. Back to my pages list, I have a lovely page here called Restricted Toolbar. So I've essentially created a custom toolbar that has very little on it. Save and exit, I can insert my components. This button allows me to maximize the content region, just makes my region bigger if I need to see it a little bit better. And then I like having this Restore Last Draft button. It allows me to come back into this region if I accidentally get kicked out. The system will store any of the edits I've made for about 20 minutes if they weren't saved, so I can come back and save it. I like including that button. So let's take that example of our image. Let's go ahead and insert a component here. I've created a handful here called Toolbar, and I'm going to look at this one here called Insert Image. I've restricted my options here. So I can choose my specific image. Maybe I'll come over here and take it from my science folder again. I can decide which size I want that image to appear as. So is this image going to be in the text? Is it going to be a full width image? Or do I have specific image sizes for specific snippets? I can specify that here. So maybe I want this one to be a full width image. My image alt text here, this is an image. I can decide if I want it on the right or on the left. Actually, that probably won't work with my full width. So let's switch it to in text. I can put it on the right, I can put it on the left. And for this one, I've even added the ability to add a caption. I can decide where that caption is. By default, it's going to be centered, but I can scoot my caption to the right or to the left. Bottom right-hand corner, I'm going to save, and I'll be able to see it preview right here. So here's my caption underneath it. There's my image. I can go ahead and switch this over. Maybe I want this image for my specific snippet. It gets a little bit bigger. Let's see how this looks on full width because it's a little image. Oh, it's not too bad. There we go. And then my caption down at the bottom, I can make adjustments with where I want that. So maybe I want the caption on the left side of that image. So it'll scoot over here. So I have that flexibility. So now I can specify to my editors, these are the options that you have with your images. This is what you can do with them. Here's a caption. Notice on mine, I made the caption optional. You could make that required to make sure that all of your images across your whole site have that. Let's talk about some other fancy things that you can do in here. Back to our components. I've had a lot of schools ask about headings. So oftentimes when you have kind of that open editable region, let's look at that again. Pages, we're gonna open that up in a new tab. Let's open up that editable region. I have a drop-down that allows me to put my headings in it, but all of these are going to be visible. So if I never want my editors to ever create a heading 1 on the page because it's used by default on that page heading, I can create a component that'll restrict it. So let's grab that heading component. And this allows me to specify, do you want an H2, H3, H4, and what do you want the text to be? So maybe I want this to be an H3. This is a heading. I don't have that one previewing, so let's save and exit. So I can specify what is available to my editors. This is actually a pretty fancy component. Let's take a look at it. Back to my components list here. I'm going to scroll down to my toolbar headings. It's really not a lot of code. Checking it out, I'm going to go to source code, and you're going to notice the heading level itself is being chosen and dropped inside my angled brackets. And then the text is just going between it. So how is that element being built? Back to my form elements, I can open up that heading level. Here are my choices with what I want the editor to see. But under my advanced tab, I can set different values for each of those. So if I wanted to give a friendly name for these headings, so maybe for H2, I didn't want it to say H2, I wanted this to say top level heading. I can set my item here, so there's that friendly name, and in my advanced field, I can make this be an H2. So in the code, the H2 will get inserted, but my editors are going to see that friendly version of it. So that's a nice thing that you can do with your different options there in the components. One thing I did want to mention too, notice that this first one is pre-selected here inside the editable region. If you're building components that are going to insert into the code, I recommend you have something pre-selected, just so that way you don't have these empty angled brackets. It already has something in there, and then the editor can choose something different. Back to my restricted toolbar, what else can we do? We can do so much. So opening this up here, maybe I want to create a button. So inside the editable region, I can create a link and then add a class to that link. But as you guys are probably aware, when I'm creating a link, the drop down for my classes here is going to be every single class that I have set up in my styles.txt file. So oftentimes when we have schools that have separate classes for their links and then for their text and then for their images, what we'll do is we'll put parentheses around the end of it and just kind of specify this is for an image, this is for a link. If you don't want that to happen, you can have just maybe your text styles and styles.txt. And rather than having your editors use this to insert the links, you can have them use a component. Same generalized idea here. What do you want your text for the button to be? Where do you want to link to? And you can decide upon any kind of button, class, color, fancy styling that you have here. So on mine, I have some kind of nice gradient information. So this is my gradient button. And we'll make this one go from green to red. Let's see. I have this nice gradient button here that I can just use a component for. Question, you have a component that fix each flaw in the editor that the devs refuse to actually fix. Can you please let the admin disable H1? Understood. One of the things about that dropdown is because it is built out by the editor itself. That editor has this as its list. So the options that you see listed here are hard-coded into the editor. That's why we're not able to turn things on and off in here. So I hear your frustrations. What I can do is I can make a note so our dev team is aware as they make adjustments and changes to our editor and update it for future. I'll be able to see if they could make those adjustments in it. But for the time being, you now have this lovely ability to be able to customize what you want your editors to do. Back over to my restricted toolbar. We'll take out that button. Other things you can do, you can pre-set up tables. One of the things that I find to be extra button clicks inside the WYSIWYG editor is creating tables, because tables require a lot in order to make them accessible. When you create a table inside the editor, you start by selecting how big you want that table to be. And then this top row here needs to be a header row. So I need to hover over row and change that property so that it's a header. And then what I should do is I should add a scope to my cells here. So I'm going to select my cell properties, and then the scope on this is going to be a column because this header is applying to the column of data underneath it. So I should be doing that for all of my header row. So a couple of extra button clicks. Some of your editors may not realize that all of those steps are required in order to have a well-accessible table, but you can create it. So you can create it using a component, but in this case, it's going to be locked to the number of rows that you have. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you wanted a specific number of rows, you can use a component for it. And I've done essentially just a title and 2 cells underneath each one. If you wanted this to be more flexible, so for example, if you wanted a table that's already appropriately set up with the header row and the scope on the appropriate cells, but you want to allow your editors to be able to create multiple rows afterwards, at that point you could just use it as a snippet. Snippets you can duplicate. So those are a couple of things. What else we got in here? I created another one for a quote. So quote text, quote author. Let's drop something in here really quick just to make it easy so you can see it. So these are the kinds of things where if your editors need to make multiple button clicks inside the WYSIWYG in order to make something happen. So maybe your style doesn't have a fancy block quote already set up. So every time you put in a quote, you have to center the text and you're changing the color and you're italicizing it and you're adjusting the font size and all of that. You can set it up as a component and just have it build out and give you that style without all of those extra button clicks. All right, so that wraps up the things I wanted to show you about wrangling your editors. Let's talk about fancy things. Let's talk about extra things you can do inside the editor using components. So again, keep in mind, these things are going to be, you should cross-reference with your design and with your style to make sure that they fit with what your website is designed to be. So some things that I've seen customers try to do that maybe weren't included in your original design were to embed PDFs. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a component here, and I have a PDF embed link. All this one asks me to do is choose my PDF file. That's it. Save. I don't have it previewing here inside the WYSIWYG, but when I save and exit, I have this nice, beautiful sample PDF file. And the nice thing about this one, let's publish it out, is that it's actually responsive to the size of my screen. So if I shrinky-dink this down, this particular display actually follows with me. So I don't end up with a PDF that I have to scroll all the way out for. So I like this with the responsiveness on it. I have seen some schools that on mobile device, they just take out or hide the embedded PDF and switch it over to icon. You can do that using Media Query. So that is an option as well. So I have a question, what happens if you remove components and it is inserted in pages? So if I completely delete out the component, let's give it a try. Cancel. It should get removed from your page. So that was the PDF embed link.
Yeah, it should, deleting a component should remove it from all pages. And that does also permanently delete it from OU Campus and cannot be undone. If there's a component that you don't want users to use anymore, but you maybe don't want to completely get rid of it or remove it from pages it's on, you can disable it. And that will keep the component in the system, but it won't permanently delete it.
Thank you, Erica. So deleting these from inside OU Campus will remove it from inside OU Campus. So let's get rid of that PDF embed. So back over here, quick refresh. The component itself, I end up with this broken component place saver here, but on my live page, quick refresh, it is still here. When I publish things out inside OU Campus, because it's a decoupled system, that published version goes to the live website as a flat static file. So even though I've removed it from inside OU Campus, it is still here on the live site. So I would need to republish that page if I wanted to remove it from my live site. All right, down to the wire on this. Other fancy things that we have. I've seen schools who want to do columns. So maybe your particular design didn't come with columns. I've created one here. Actually, I've created two here. My first one is using Foundation as the framework for my CSS. That happens to be what my sandbox is built on. I created a second one for Bootstrap as well. Both of those sets of codes will be available on the Training Tuesday page of a support site. So if you're using one or the other, you have it set up already. But pretty simple and straightforward. And the nice thing here is I have a WYSIWYG option when I'm creating those form fields. So I can give my editor this mini WYSIWYG to be able to make some of those special styling inside it's the component itself. So let's go ahead and just grab another block of text. Copy, paste, paste. Save and exit. So I can get this particular one. So this is two columns that are 50-50. If we come over to our component list, let's take a look at that one. So this is my columns equal width. This is my Bootstrap one. This is the one with it that is Foundation. So in order to make it 50-50, I have to use the classes that are part of my Foundation here. So this one happens to use columns as a singular class, and then I can specify on the screen size how wide it should be. Those numbers at the end of them should add up to 12. So if I didn't want this to be equal, I could do, say, a 3 and 9. So I'd have one column that was skinnier than another. So you can create those and set them up that way. All right. Other fancy things that you can do. I had all sorts of fun playing with images. I can overlay text on an image. I can overlay buttons on an image. So let me show you one of these. We'll go ahead and choose our image. Maybe inside Campus, I'll choose, sure, that one. I need all text on my image for accessibility purposes. So this is Campus Square. Where do I want the image? Do I want the image on the right or on the left? So maybe I'll move the entire image to the right. What color do I want the text over it? Well, for this particular image, I think white text will probably be best. Here's my overlay text. And then I can decide upon the location where I want that text to reside. So do I want it in the upper left, the upper right? Do I want it centered on it? So let's go ahead and center it on it. Save. There's my text with my image in the background there. So if I wanted to go ahead and move the placement of that, maybe I want to move it into the upper left instead. Save. There's my text. So this one is actually using quite a bit of inline CSS, but you'd never know it because you have these friendly locations here about where you want the text. Let's take a look at that component. So this is the image with the text overlay. If I look at those form elements, there's my text location. Nice, friendly phrasing here, but if I go over to my advanced field, I have some CSS working in here. This probably isn't going to make much sense to your typical editors, but you can have it here as just the value, and then prompt your editors with something that's user-friendly. Other cool things. So same generalized idea when we're talking about the overlay with the button. I could put a button over my component or over my image. So if I wanted to have like a call to action button, I could do that. I can shape my image. Where it is. Fancy image. So sometimes you have images that are going to get placed on your page, but maybe the CSS doesn't change the shape of the image. So the shape always comes out square. And I want this image to be rounded, or I want to be able to slice off a portion of the image. You can do that using CSS. So from this image here, I can go ahead and choose one. So maybe we'll go down to science or any of these. Let's see. I want a square image for this one. So I'm going to use placekitten.com because that allows me to create a square image right there. Because I want to be able to make it completely rounded and make it a circular display, which will work with the CSS I've created for square images. Now, there is CSS you can apply to images that are not square in order to make them round, but it didn't have all of that CSS built out. It's only going to apply to square ones here, but I want to show you how it does. So this is going to be a cute kitten. And let's make it a circular display. No slicing for now. I'll show you what that is in a second. Save. So it takes my square image and it rounds it. So I have a nice circle on it. So this could be really nice for profile pages or news articles, things like that, if you wanted a specific image. So maybe I just want to round the corners. I don't want it completely circular. I can do that. Now let's talk about slicing. So no rounding anymore, but maybe I want to make this super fancy. We're going to slice off the top right corner. I can do that. So I can set up my image to have whatever fancy shifted change that I want on it. Question, how do you add the WYSIWYG editor to long text fields and components? Back over to my components. When I'm in my form elements, I have an option here that is specifically the WYSIWYG editor. So long text is going to be a large text box, but it only accepts text. If I want it to be actual WYSIWYG, I would use this WYSIWYG editor option. All right. Back to my fancy page. Last thing I'm going to show you here, Parallax Images. So on some of the newer designs that I see coming in, you end up with an image that's kind of frozen in the background, and then as you scroll on the page, the image stays where it is, but the text moves over it. I always found that to be really interesting to see. So I'm going to go ahead and create one of those. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to take a couple blocks of text. So I'm going to have some text above, some text below, and I want that image to slide here in between them. Creating my component, I did go ahead and call this my parallax image, and it's going to ask me for which image I want. So let's go ahead and choose a big one for that one. So maybe from campus, let's find a really big one. That's a big one. That one will work for us. Bottom right-hand corner, I'll click insert, and we'll save it. So again, I don't have it previewing here because that style is going to apply over here. So now here are my two sets of text, and as I scroll, the parallax image comes with me. I always find that to be exciting. All right. Whew, that was a lot of stuff. So as I mentioned earlier, all of the example code that we have, I will be providing to you. It'll be available on the Training Tuesday page. So you'll be able to adopt, steal, use any of the things that you guys are seeing here. I hope you've enjoyed seeing all the creative uses that I've come up with components. If you have any ideas or if your school is using other creative ideas, we'd love to hear about them when you fill out that post-webinar survey. I can take a moment right now and invite any additional questions that you guys might have. And as we do, question. Are there any ways to ensure that all of the options are accessible, maybe in the same way that there are link checkers when publishing? It seems as though many issues can be created by link editors to do all these things. When you build out the component itself, you are building the HTML. So as long as the HTML that you're putting in is accessible, when it's placed on the page, it'll maintain that accessibility. So good example of that is the alt text for images. You can add that as a field and require it. Same idea with the tables, adding those and have it required. So it really comes down to when you're building it out, make sure that code is accessible and it will be maintained when it gets dropped on the page. Any other questions? All right. As you guys are potentially typing, let me go ahead and throw this one up there. Erica, would you like to take this one?
Yes, so we're going to be taking a little break for the holidays. I believe all you guys are as well. So the next Training Tuesday will be in January in the new year. And we'll be covering the topic of cleaning up for the new year, you know, maybe getting rid of some of those files and pages and other things that are cluttering up your site. And you want to start the new year on the right foot and start it fresh with a clean, organized website. So we're going to be talking about some of the tools that OU Campus has that can help you keep on top of all of that and keep everything neat and clean. As always, you can find the registration link for that on the support site on the OCN, along with all the resources and the recording of this Training Tuesday. And it looks like we have a handful of questions that came in. We did get another vote for having repeatable component sections within your larger component. So we will pass that along to the dev team. I think that is something that is in the roadmap for inclusion. It's just a question of where specifically it falls.
Perfect. And then the other questions that we've had here, allow me to jump in. We had a question about, can the text inside the component be edited? So I'm going to need to clarify or a clarification on that one. Are we talking about the text that I have submitted, or are we talking about the text of the form itself? Yes, I'll take that as yes, both, please. So let's do that. So let's say I have something like the whole page. That'll take forever to fill in. Let's take one of our other ones here. Student Spotlight, nice simple component. Ask for some minimal information here. Again, no one's gonna find out that number ever. So as I enter information here, and I hit save, maybe I come in here and I realize, oh, I forgot to put my last name on here. I need to put my name on it. When I click and select the component, I do get two options. So this whole time I've been editing here, I've been clicking that X to delete out the component, but you do have a pencil option here. That's going to reopen the form field with all of the information I've already put in. So I can come in and edit and make adjustments here. So any of the text that you put on can be edited here. If I wanted to change the questions, so maybe I didn't want this to say student name, I want this to say your name. That I would do at the component itself. So I would need to find that particular component that happens to be Student Spotlight. And I can edit it here to change what that label says. So this should be your name instead. So I can make those edits on either side. Question, are there more resources for exploring components further? Yes, there are. So I threw up this slide before that talked about if you're new to components. This page on our support site is going to give you some base operations. How do you create it? How do you use it? But those Training Tuesdays that we have are going to dive in even deeper. So we have a couple that we did in 2019, and a good example of a deeper dive is extending table transformation and components with XSL. That's the next level. That requires a little bit more than just your basic HTML, but it gives you a nice idea of what could come next, what additional things you can do for it. So check out those resources on our support site. Those will absolutely be available for you. Definitely want to be able to update the component source markup after it's been created. It sounds like it cannot be edited or enhanced once created. So that may be a miscommunication on my part. You can change the source code on it. So I can always come in here and change the code. After I make that change, I can save it and launch it here, and it will push that change out to my other locations. So let's take a look here. So notice right here, education is currently bolded. Maybe I don't want that major to be bolded. I want it to be italicized instead. I can change that in the component source code. That's one of those nifty syncs in components. They're still linked back to the original source code. So in here, let's see, there's my major. Right now it's wrapped in a strong. I'm gonna wrap it in an EM instead. Save, and I'll launch it again here. So now that change will get pushed out. So if I come back here, refresh my page, that education is now italicized. So I can change the code here. So things to be aware of if you're making edits to components that already exist in other pages. If you create additional fields and say make those fields required, anywhere you've placed that component already, those fields will be empty. So as soon as you open that component again, you will get an error message that says that field's required. So you'd have to go back and fill those in. Question, can you add?
I was just going to jump in also to the previous question asking about if there's more resources for exploring components. Our upcoming conference, OUTC 20, in the middle of March, we are going to have a workshop on components as well. So if that's something you're able to attend, that would be a good chance to get some hands-on experience with creating components.
Plus, you'll get the opportunity to meet this lovely smiling face in person. What better perk than that, right? All right, our next question here. Can you add links to text blocks inside of components? Links to text blocks inside of components. Using the WYSIWYG option, you could. So if I have a WYSIWYG field, I could create a text block here. Let's actually use one of the components that has that. We'll take that out. We'll put in my to column. So I could put my block of text in here. And using my WYSIWYG, I can add, maybe I want to link this word universe. I have the option to be able to link here. So I could put in links on it using this. Beyond that, I would need to have it hard-coded or separated out. So remember that full page component that we were looking at before? Cancel, cancel, cancel. Where I had some text and then the quote in the middle and some other text. I needed to set this up as 3 separate questions. Question 1, question 2, question 3, because of the way I wanted this formatted. I couldn't just insert the quote in the center of it. So if you had a really specific setup where you knew it was going to be starting text, link, ending text, you could set it up as 3 separate questions like that and then have those set up not using WYSIWYG. But if you want to be able to sporadically add in those links, the WYSIWYG is the way to go. How important is it to include components in a large site redesign? At the end of the day, it's up to you. Components are just one of our 3 different types of reusable content, and it comes down to the experience for your editors and the administrative use for you. Each of those pieces of reusable content have different benefits depending on how you're planning on using it. So when we're talking about assets, assets are locked on the page. They can only be edited through this particular link menu. So if I want to be able to place things on the page and I don't want my editors putzing around with it, I can use assets. Snippets allow me to keep the same styling on each page, but it's essentially a copy and paste the code onto the page. It doesn't link back to the original snippet, but it does give you the ability to make edits on the page. More often than not, the snippets that we're using are table transformation snippets. So it looks like a table inside the editable region. If that may be confusing for your editors, that's when components can come in. Components allow you to have those set questions. You can direct them to set field types. So in this space, you are choosing a file. In this space, you are choosing an image. So you can be really specific about those things and guide them a little bit easier. So there's no right or wrong answer in any of these. It's just these are tools or resources. Pick whatever is going to make your life easiest. Is there a way to add headings? So I think
And
this is referencing back to that WYSIWYG.
Yeah, the mini WYSIWYG.
That was my guess.
Came in.
Yep. Let's grab that again. So the WYSIWYG that I see here is a mini WYSIWYG. So it does not have all of the options available that my full editor does. So from here, no, I wouldn't be able to add it as a dropdown. It would be something that either would have to be done in the editor itself, or it'd have to specifically specify it in the component that this is a heading. It's totally possible, though, to have your editors create the heading and drop the component underneath it. So if you have all of the styling that you want for the piece itself and the only piece you're missing is that heading, you could absolutely do it just inside the editor. That is an option. All right, other questions?
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else come in. First, you're always welcome to contact us later if you do think of something else. With that being said, as you're leaving, please do fill out the end of webinar survey. That feedback is really helpful. It lets us know what you want to see so that we can tailor our training sessions to what's most helpful for you guys. And as always, this recording, all resources, the code for the components, those can all be found on our support site within a couple of business days. So thank you everybody very much for attending. Have a great rest of your day. Have a happy holidays, and we will see you in the new year.